I'll have to go back to around 1984, and that's when Johnson was pastoring in the United Methodist Church. And both of us had agreed that starting a church was something that we would not be interested in doing. So coming up on 91, I knew that he was feeling or sensing it was time for him to depart from the United Methodist Church, and we had made plans to do so. The plan was to resign from his church, and we were going to go back to our home church and to find out, and just to wait and see what it was that God was directing us and where we're supposed to go. So I began to just feel in myself that he's sitting on the pew or being assistant somewhere just didn't fit him. And so I went to him and I just said, I don't know if that's you, if that's what so you're a leader, you're a pastor, you're a preacher. Have you thought about maybe you should just start your own church? And he just had this sigh of relief because God had laid that on his heart about going out and establishing a church. But because we had made that pact back in 1984, he didn't know how to come to me and say that this is what he felt God was leading him to do. So, God had to do some work on my heart to get me ready for it. And so by me going to him, and he was already there, so it was a relief for him, and it was definitely a relief to me because I felt, yeah, this is good. This is where I was at peace with it. This is what he was supposed to be doing. And so that's how it all started for us.
The Sunday he announced his resignation, he gave his sermon, gave the altar call, then he goes on and announces that he's going to resign. Like, I figured that meant leaving, but somehow just, I don't know if it's the spirit, something just told me that meant leaving. And I remember that was the first time I ever saw my father cry. I saw him start to cry in the pulpit, and I saw my mother go and hug him. That was the first time I've ever had seen my parents like that. And I just knew this was a big deal.
When he first came to us to ask us about becoming a part of First Christian, we were shocked because he was our friend, and we didn't know he was a pastor initially. And then when he shared with us that he was a pastor and that he wanted us to become a part of his new venture in terms of starting a new church, we were definitely humbled and excited and ready to follow him.
He told certain people that he was going to start a church. And I said, oh, Pastor, you didn't tell me. And he said, no, because you was really into this former church. I was doing, quite a few tasks up there. And I said, oh, no, I'm going to follow you because you bring the word. And to get my life together, it was better for me to follow not him, but God, too.
When he chose me, I was like, me? He chose me? It was just such an awesome feeling to know that he had chosen me because he saw something in me that would help the ministry calling that he had on his life.
I am so happy that and give praise to God that Reverend Richard Johnston chose me. I don't know how I would have felt if he hadn't chose me to come into this vision with him. I had been assisting him for many years, since about 1980. And so therefore I felt a connection as Joshua would to Moses to enact in this great vision that he had, God had given him.
I didn't just want to come to church to be at church. I wanted to have something to do to help a church, to help God, to do my work that I felt God had called me to do. And First Christian allowed me that.
The organization or organizing First Christian has been, or was the smoothest thing. It was smooth. I'm not saying we didn't have certain challenges, you know, especially when it was coming to the building itself and the financing of the building. So it had those particular challenges. But it wasn't ever a thing where it was just overwhelming, and it was a pleasure. It was a joy. You know, we look forward to Sundays. We look forward to working at the church. It wasn't anything for us to be at the church 12, 13 hours a day and enjoy every minute of it. I think that all speaks to when you are in the will of God, that He makes those pathways straight for you. And the organizing First Christian and those early years, no, it wasn't hard. We wouldn't have walked away from it.
When my father passed away, I was only 12 years old, so he was the only closest relative that I can honestly remember passing. I didn't know children lost parents. That was one of the hardest things I think I've ever been through, and it impacted my life tremendously on so many levels. I remember one time, like right after my dad had passed, and I was talking to two people that actually went to the church, and I was crying, but I was crying because I was like, what's going to happen to First Christian now? To me, that was my connection. So it was like First Christian was life, and now that my dad is gone, what's going to happen? And I remember them saying that, you know, everything was going to be okay, that we were going to be fine, and that the church was going to still keep moving. That 2001 year when he passed away was hell on wheels. And it was bad, you know, because, you know, here my mom, everybody was going through their separate things. I didn't know how to cope. My brother didn't know how to cope. My mom didn't know how to cope. But we're all trying to figure out how to keep moving now that my father is gone.
I really thought God had betrayed us. I was kind of conflicted, if you will. On one hand, I'm thinking or feeling like He had betrayed us. And then on the other hand, but God isn't a betrayer. So I had that conflict that was going on in my heart and in my mind. And so it was such turmoil. And I think what even took it even further is when I began sensing that God was calling me to become pastor. And to be honest, I got a little upset with God, because I was like, why are you asking me to be a pastor when there was one already here?
So it was difficult, but I remember when my mom said that she was going to become the pastor of FCC, I don't think it ever crossed our mind like, oh, this shouldn't happen. To me, it was the perfect solution. But it just amazed me of how much hatred came about. And being 12 years old and hearing people talk about your mom, that was, oh my goodness, it was devastating. Like, I was so mad at people, so mad at people. To be 12, I don't think that's the part. I think when people start saying things, they think that it's only hurting one person, but they don't understand the ripple effect that it actually has. And it took a long time to start trusting. And I will say that I thank God for how He's used my mom, because my mom was the plan all along. There wasn't a plan B. God has no plan Bs. She was what it's supposed to be.
But I don't believe that the vision was only given to Richard Johnson III. I believe that it was given also to his helpmate, Dr. Kern V. Johnson. For that reason, I believe that even though the vision has not died, the vision will all more together be even the more as God empower her to take us to higher heights and deeper depths in Christ Jesus.
It hurt, and it still hurt. But I knew that God was molding and already shaping Pastor Kern on being the next pastor.
Because I have to give honor to Pastor Karen, because it wasn't for her to keep the vision going, and I think that we probably would have been lost. And because of his passing, and because she was called by God to continue at church today.
I could see something in her that's meant to be out in front of people instead of behind. So the fact that when she became pastor and gave her first sermon, it's like I could see the growth potential in that place where God had placed her and her abilities to do that.
Looking at it, it's kind of really funny how everything worked out, because even though it's Founders Day and we're reminiscing about, the start that came under my father, when I really look at First Christian, even though he was the conduit through first where God first spoke, it really was always intended to be my mother's church, to be our mother's church. Because when you look at it, he was the pastor for 10 years. She's been the pastor for 15. He didn't like this property when we first selected it. She loved it. We chose this land because she loved it. So it's like God was always setting in motion the transition for when his light extinguished for her to take over. You can't script that any better.
The vision of First Christian is not, or was not, Pastor Richard Johnson III's vision. It's not Pastor Karen Johnson's vision. It's God's vision. We were people that God called to carry forth his vision. And so when we get to when we have that proper understanding and seeing the context, we then take away that a vision is a person's. First Christian is not a person's vision. First Christian is God's vision. That's why when God called Pastor Johnson the third home, the church remains, because the visionary still remains. He was still, the visionary was still in place. And it was just my turn to carry the baton, if you will.
FCC has, in my view, become a church beyond my imagination. In the initial vision from our late Pastor Richard Johnson, I think it has surpassed its expectation, my expectation of what a church is and could be.
I did not see First Christian as being the church it is now. I think that we all met and wanted to be a part of something meaningful, but I didn't envision the number of people we have today seeing the vision and wanting to be a part of First Christian.
Honestly, I know it's a cliche when people say you haven't seen nothing yet, but I feel it's the honest to God truth that you really have not seen anything yet for what God really has in store for this church. We're really just starting to get cooking, and it's going to be an amazing ride, and I'll look forward to what's going to happen in the next 25 years.